Alright guys, this is the Airbnb for this very short trip.
What's up guys? Welcome back to another episode of... I forgot to turn off the fan. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Nujabes Poker Vlogs. Today is a very special episode. As you can see, I'm in an Airbnb, not in my room. Let me give you guys a tour real quick.
So as soon as you walk through the door, you see this right here, and this, guys, is where the magic will not be happening.
The only hardwood that's gonna be in this room is this table right here. The only thing getting sat on is this futon right here. The only hot vegan chicks you guys are gonna be seeing are these right here. And the only thing getting wet is this shower right here. Okay, so I am in an Airbnb in Commerce, California, technically in Maywood, but we're really close to Commerce Casino, so I'm just gonna say Commerce because today is my birthday. I'm turning 22 for the 6th time. 22 for the 6th time. So it's my 6th 22nd birthday, and I thought I'd just come to LA to enjoy LA stuff as well as play some LA poker. The last time I was at Commerce Casino was like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And I thought it'd be nice to get an Airbnb that was close to an LA casino. So this was the one I found. I was originally planning on doing a Vegas trip, but I thought the drive was just a little bit inconvenient and I'd rather just chill close to home but be like far enough away so that, you know, it's interesting. Contrary to what a lot of people who watch the vlog believe, I don't actually live in LA. I'm about an hour-ish, maybe like 40 minutes south depending on traffic. So it's still kind of sort of an adventure to come out here, and there's just stuff here that you don't really find in Orange County. So I just finished up a session at Commerce Casino. Unfortunately, although it was a good session, a very good session, it was mostly just run good, and there weren't many hands where I really like outplayed or did anything that spectacular or interesting. So I will show you a couple hands from that session just so that you can see. But after that, I'm just gonna skip to whatever the next future session is, just so that we can actually have some interesting hands and interesting spots, because that is the heart and soul of a poker vlog. So without further ado, let's get into the hands. Also, I just got a dinner for myself, late dinner, from a place called Hot Vegan Chicks. A friend of mine actually wanted to make a business with that name, but unfortunately it already exists. But it's really good. If you guys are ever in the Commerce area, feel free to check it out. It's pretty awesome and very close to Commerce Casino actually, only like 10 to 13 minutes away. They also got flan. I don't want to turn it too much because I'm gonna spill it, but yeah. All right guys, let's get into the hands.
All right guys, we're gonna get into just a couple hands from the session at Commerce that I played on my actual birthday. The poker room at Commerce Casino has the most tables I've ever seen, and it's a very nice room that I'm pretty sure was recently remodeled. There are these little screens on the table that I think are for some kind of gambling game, and they're pretty much useless and make it really annoying to shuffle your chips. But besides that, the room is pretty cool, I guess. Unfortunately, I ran super well, so a lot of the hands were not that interesting, and most of them were just really straightforward, but these next two are worth sharing. So for the first one, I'm going to start off with the hand where I had Ace-Jack. We're playing 5-5. I opened to $20 from early position, and I get a call from the player on the button. This player was very straightforward. He bet when he had good hands, and in a lot of hands, he actually got to showdown and showed that he had something for value, so he seemed like a player who would not really get out of line too much. We're going to a flop heads up, which comes down Ace-4-7 with 2 hearts. Great flop for us, and we've got a backdoor flush draw to go with our top pair. I decided to mix it up this time and actually check, even though this is a perfect spot to bet here. I was just running super well, so a lot of the times I just ended up c-betting or betting turn, and people ended up folding a lot. So in this case, I thought it'd be good to mix it up, especially having the Jack of Hearts, which makes me a little less scared of a flush completing card on the turn. The button ends up betting here. He makes it $20, and I just flat call, hoping he's going to continue betting. Turn card is the Queen of Clubs, so honestly shouldn't have changed much. I end up checking it over to him. He checks back. The river is a 6 of clubs, which I'd consider a blank against this specific player. And this time I decide to play a little unorthodox once again. Given my line, it probably doesn't look like I have much. Maybe some kind of heart draw that decided not to bet flop. The point is, I think it's going to look really bluffy if I decide to bet really big here. So I actually put out an overbet of 125 here, hoping to make it look like a bluff, and I'm pretty certain in the spot that my hand's good. My opponent pretty quickly makes a call, and he ends up mucking once I show, so it kind of worked out for us. Obviously a little unorthodox, kind of a non-standard line, but happy to have won this hand.
Okay guys, I know we're in the middle of the hand histories, and I just finished filming the outro, but this is like the best flan I've ever tasted, and you guys gotta go here. So I'll just put the business logo here. Just go here if you're ever in LA or like the commerce area. Okay, back to the hands.
All right, everyone, buckle up because this next hand is a pretty crazy one and a session defining one, I'd say, although I was already running really well, but this was the biggest pot of the night. And it's going to start off with me having Jack 10 suited in the cutoff. Action folds to me, and I open it up to $20. I get called by the player on the button, and the player in the small blind 3-bets to $70. The big blind flats the 3-bet. I make the call with my suited connector, happy to call here, especially facing a fairly small raise, and the player on the button folds. So we're going 3 ways to a flop, and it comes down 9, 7, 5 with 2 diamonds. So a pretty spicy flop. We've got 2 overcards, a flush draw, as well as a gut shot. Now, just for context, the player in the small blind who 3-bet seemed like a good player from what I gathered. And the player in the big blind who flatted the 3-bet was the same player from the previous hand who, as I said, was very straightforward. So we're going to keep those in mind as the hand progresses. The small blind puts out a C-bet of $140, and he only has about 400 or so left behind after this. And when he bets here, I'm pretty much just putting him on either an overpair or maybe pocket nines, and then, some kind of combo draw, but I am blocking several of those combos. I'd say most likely an overpair. And what's interesting is that the player in the big blind almost immediately raises to $400. He's the only player at the table who has me covered. I have about $1,200 in my stack. And now we're in a really interesting spot because this is one of the best draws I'm going to have in this specific spot. But it also is a very particular situation where I'm pretty certain the player in the big blind has a value hand when he raises here, just given how he'd played this whole session. I don't think he's ever going to have some kind of like semi-bluff here. I think he for sure has a made hand. 2 pair, like 9-7 suited, or potentially some kind of overpair that didn't want to 4-bet. The player in the small blind, as I said, was a good player, and I think he's capable of folding an overpair here if I decide to raise. But I don't know if I can get the big blind off his hand, as I said, so it makes raising as a semi-bluff a little less appealing. Obviously, in a heads-up situation, I'm always raising in this spot, but in this situation, it feels kind of bad to raise. Also feels bad to just fold when I have one of the best hands I'm going to have here. I decide to just call here and hope that I can hit my draw on the turn. If not, I'm happy to fold. In addition to this, there are a couple scare cards that could come out that could maybe make my opponent reevaluate and check, in which case I could potentially get a free card. And I also think that me calling here, given the stack sizes and the dynamic and what's going on in the hand, also looks very strong, and the player in the small blind might just fold anyway, knowing that both of us are likely to be strong. And once I make the call, the small blind looks like he's in a disgusting spot, doesn't seem too happy about the situation, and after a while of thinking, he does indeed let go of his hand. So probably got him off of an overpair here, and we are going to a turn card heads up. Hopefully it's a good one. It comes down the 6 of spades. Not a card that helps us, but it does put 4 to a straight out there, and a hand I could very likely have is something like 9-8 or 8-7. So this could be one of those potential scare cards that could get my opponent to check, and my opponent does actually check to me. So now action's on us. I could check and get a free card, but in this situation, I decided I'm going to take the aggressive route, and I know shoving seems like the only reasonable option here, but I decided to actually do something a little weird again, and I bet $300 into a pot of almost $1,200, leaving myself like $500 behind, and I'm getting the money in no matter what, obviously, after making this bet. But I think betting small here, I don't know, maybe does some kind of like psychological stuff, could look really strong, like I'm trying to get a crying call from something. And my opponent does not seem happy, and like I said, this guy was pretty straightforward. I don't think he's Hollywooding here, and he tanks for quite a bit and seems pretty frustrated with the situation. But he eventually throws in 3 white chips, and we are going to a river card, guys. Now, you might not have known this, but Commerce, California has another name, and it is Bink City, because the river is the 8 of spades, giving us the nut straight. It does complete the backdoor flush draw, but we're not worried about that. We are getting the money in, and once my opponent puts me all in for $500, I immediately call and let him know I have the goods, and I'll let you see what happens next.
All in.
I call. I have the nut straight.
Oh, you have it?
Guys, we could not have run better this session. I mean, obviously you could always run better, but this was pretty much the best session I could have possibly asked for on my actual birthday. And even in some of the more straightforward hands where I didn't get too much value, didn't really matter. We picked up small to medium sized pots, built up a big stack, and then got it all in against the only player who had us covered for a huge pot. By the way, his opponent had a really good attitude. I got involved with many hands with him and pretty much won all of them, and the whole time he was just smiling and laughing, even after this huge pot where he lost with aces. So I know this hand was just kind of me running well, but there is a really important lesson to be learned, and it is to just 4-bet your aces pre-flop, guys. Don't slow play your aces.
He gamble. He gamble.
No, not gamble.
Oh, flush draw.
Flush draw, not gamble.
Those were the only two hands worth sharing. I ended up buying in for $500 initially and cashed out for $26.34, which makes for a profit of just over $2,100.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20, 30, 31, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Before we get into the next session, I spent the next day doing fun birthday stuff. One of those was going to a climbing gym in Hawthorne called Hangar 18. I have a membership to Hangar 18, but I've only been to the location in Orange, so this was my first time at a different climbing gym. The grading at this gym definitely felt a bit more difficult than the one I normally go to, so it's kind of interesting to see how different the climbs are and how the difficulty can vary depending on what gym you go to. We're gonna get into some hands now that I played in my next session, which was at the Gardens Casino. In this first one, I've got Ace-Jack offsuit in the cutoff. There's a $10 straddle, 1 call, and I raise it up to 40 once action folds to me. 3 people call, so we're gonna be going 4 ways to a flop, which comes down 8 Ace-10 with 2 clubs. The small blind decides to actually lead out into everyone here, and he makes it $100. Not really sure what he's doing this with. I imagine that I'm going to be ahead a decent amount of the time since I think he would have 3-bet something like ace-queen or better. I decide to just make the call once action folds to me. The turn is a very good card for us. It's the jack of spades, so no flush, and we've now got 2 pair. And the effective stack isn't that much above pot, so he decides to just rip it in, and obviously we have a very easy call here. The river brings the king of clubs, which is possibly the worst card that could have come. And my opponent ends up showing us 10-9 of clubs after I tell him that I have 2 pair. So he ended up flopping middle pair with a flush draw and some backdoors and ended up getting there. So we're going to be down quite a bit to start off the session. I had already lost a couple hands before this, and at this point I was probably down around 400 or 500. To make matters worse, I play this next hand pretty badly. I've got pocket 7s in the hijack. There's an early position raised to $15 and 4 callers, including myself. The flop comes down 9-6-4 with 2 spades. We do have the 7 of spades for what it's worth. So I've got a pair plus all kinds of backdoors. I'm in position against every single player except for the button. So once action checks to me, I decide to bet here. Not super sure how I feel about it, but I would have expected someone to bet if they have top pair, since there's so many overcards that could come and it's a pretty draw heavy board. So I imagine they would go for some value. So once action's on me, I decide to make it $40 for protection / value. And since I have 7s here, I block a lot of the hands that could call that would have a straight draw. The player on the button folds, which is good news, and the only one who calls is the player in early position who initially raised pre-flop. The turn card is the 5 of spades, which is an interesting card because we now have a straight flush draw, but my flush draw by itself is still pretty low, and my opponent could have very well called with the flush draw himself. My opponent checks me once again, and this is where I make a very bad decision, and I decide to bet 85 here. To be honest, I was just acting quickly, and I kind of just thought to myself, I picked up equity, and I'm just going to continue betting here, but I'm essentially turning my hand into kind of a bluff, and I don't think better hands are folding or worse hands are ever calling. So this is just a really bad bet, and my opponent ends up making the call. We're going to a river card, which is the 10 of spades. I don't see any merit to betting anymore, and once my opponent checks to me, I'm just going to hope that I can somehow win with my 7 high flush. So I check it back and let him know I have a small flush, and he ended up having ace-king with the king of spades. So we're going to lose this one too. Definitely lost much more than I should have because of how I played it, so I ended up making the already losing session even worse. Hopefully we can turn things around when we pick up pocket jacks in early position. There's a $10 under the gun straddle. I'm next to act and I make it $40 and I only get called by the player in the cutoff. We're going to a flop heads up which comes down 7-9-4 with 2 clubs, so pretty safe flop for pocket jacks. I put out a pretty large c-bet of $70, definitely much larger than it needs to be, but I think many players are going to be inelastic if they have something like a straight or flush draw. I do block some of those, but I imagine this opponent is going to call any reasonably sized bet, so I decided to go for a little more value. He does end up calling. We're going to a turn card, which is the Jack of Hearts. So we turn a set, only losing to 10-8 now, and we're feeling really good about our hand. I decide to put out a bet of 175 here. Given our stack sizes, this will set up well for a river shove, and I don't really need to do that because the cutoff actually puts me all in for $735. Obviously, I instantly call, and I let him know I've got top set right away. We're just hoping for a clean river card. It comes down to 3 of spades. We should almost always have the best hand here, and once I show my hand, my opponent ends up mucking. He says that he had 2 pair on the flop, but that's no good. We end up winning a really big pot, and this is enough to get us out of the hole. My opponent left the table immediately after this hand. I end up winning a few more medium-sized pots, but they weren't that interesting. So after what seemed to be like a losing session, we end up actually making a profit. I was in for $1,300 total and ended up cashing out for $1,980.
The money shot.
So we fast forwarded.
Right.
Exactly, yeah. You know how every vlogger does it. What's up guys, this is Editor Mode Nujabes speaking. I was originally planning on playing another session to get a couple more interesting hands for the vlog since this vlog has mostly just been me running really well. I did end up playing that session, but it turned out to be way more eventful than I needed it to be. So that's gonna be a completely separate vlog coming up next. And I'm just gonna let this vlog be what it was, which is just me running really well and making big hands because it's my birthday vlog and I can do whatever I want. But if you guys wanna see me get put in some tough spots, get sucked out on, potentially lose every hand in the vlog, then subscribe. I might have something for you in like a week or so. Alright guys, back to the video. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the hands. Hopefully I won whatever next interesting session I played was because it was in the future after I'm recording all this. Obviously the session at Commerce, at least the first one, was very good. So whatever happens next, hopefully it was a win. Hopefully we can continue the run good, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. I don't know about you, but I'm turning 22. I'm not turning 27, I'm turning 22. You don't know about me, but I'm turning 22. Everything will be alright if I always keep on turning 22. 22. I don't know about you.